full moon of March. It's on the Buddhist calendar, the end of the cold season and the beginning of the hot season. It's about 50 degrees and raining. Not quite there yet, I guess. And we're moving towards the last week or so, last week and a half of our winter retreat. Community is going to be moving back into a full practice schedule, full group practice schedule, day after tomorrow for the last week. Good time to maybe start reviewing a little bit about the past 3 months and where we're at, the results of 3 months of increased solitude, more emphasis on formal practice, both group and in solitude. Kind of reflect back and see what the results have been. And to keep applying our energy and our efforts in this last week. Very precious opportunity to have one more week of this kind of schedule. But this kind of reviewing process is an important part of the practice. So we know what can happen when we apply ourselves in such a way. I think 3 obvious, or maybe not so obvious to everybody, but obvious to at least 3 people, results that we can bring into our conscious awareness and feel really pleased about as a community. Is the fact that, number 1, Anagarika Matt has requested to take on the Samanera training, and will be doing so at the end of April, and that we've got 2 other of the retreat crew helpers, Josh and Brett, have put forth their requests to take on the Anagarika training. So we've got a approval of the community for all of those aspirations, and a date set for April 27th for all 3 to change colors. Change colors from lay clothes to white and white to brown. So that's not a bad result of 3 months of practice. But this process of evaluation, it's part of a process that's talked about in the teachings and in our tradition as the 4 bases of success. And one of the monks, maybe Ajahn Panyo, I can't remember, was talking about the 4 bases of success, the 4 iddhipada, in one of the teachings that we've had over the past few months. And we're now at the 4th stage of that. Just as a refresher for those who may not have remembered, the 4 bases of success are sort of a series of qualities that are part of any kind of activity that leads to some sort of successful fruition. And the 4 aspects of that are chanda, virya, citta, vimamsa. Chanda being the initial inspiration, determination, inspiration, I guess, to take up some sort of task, to see where it goes. So there's an initial inspiration to do something, then that's followed by virya, the energy or the effort to put forth to implement it, and the third step, citta, in this case referring to application of mind, application of that energy to actually do it, whatever it is that we're setting out to do. And the fourth factor of vimamsa, evaluation, reviewing, to see the results of what we've done and to learn from it. So we can use this opportunity this last week to do some vimamsa-ing, reviewing, evaluating, and see where what's been useful, what's been not so useful, what has resulted in what we might want to call progress in some way, what didn't work, what worked, and to learn from that. This is a kind of a process that in the readings that we've been doing from the 8 qualities of a great being as expounded by Anuruddha, we've been basing our teachings around that, and we're on the 7th one right now of discernment. This Dhamma is for one who is discerning, or for one with wisdom, not for one with a lack of wisdom or without discernment. And this process of vimamsa, evaluation, is a process that requires the quality of discernment. We're looking at things actually and investigating them as to their effect. One of the questions that came up during one of the readings in the past few days, or one of the comments anyway from Jeed, was around the Kalama Sutta. It had been brought up in one of the readings or one of the teachings, and she asked, she said, well, you know, how come you all don't teach very much from the Kalama Sutta? And my response was, well, I think we did, but maybe it's been a while. It seems like something that I've brought up from time to time myself, and I've heard others do as well. Excuse me. So I thought I'd just refresh that teaching a bit, and because in a sense it does apply to this topic of review, of evaluation, using our wisdom, using our discernment. So as most of you know, the teaching comes from a time when the Buddha was visiting, I think it's Kesaputiya, not sure which, a town where the Kalamas live, a clan of beings live there, a clan of folks called the Kalamas, and they had been visited frequently by teachers and sages of different traditions, but were confused because each time these other traditions would come through, the teachers from them would expound their doctrine, their teaching, and then denounce and denigrate the teachings of other traditions, and essentially what we say is true, what they say is not. And there would be these series of groups coming through who would all say that, and it left the Kalamas confused and perplexed as to, well, who's right, who's wrong, how do we tell? And they were telling this to the Buddha. And he said, well, you have a right to be perplexed and confused. This is a good reason to be perplexed and confused. And then he goes on to expound a bit about that process of learning how to discern what to believe, what not to believe. And first mentions that, there are many ways that people make their value judgments on what to believe or what not to believe. Sometimes it's based on hearsay, sometimes it's based on a lineage of the teachings of a lineage or certain doctrines that are in place from certain teachings, or reasoned cogitation, certain kinds of logical inference that philosophical traditions would present, or just because you might believe something because your teacher said so. The guru says that this is true. So because you've taken this person as a teacher, you take it on just what they say. And the Buddha says, when you're making these judgments, don't believe them just because of these aforementioned reasons. And that is a call that you hear many times these days from groups in our Dharma circles. That even the Buddha said, don't believe something just because I say it. Don't believe something just because someone says it. And oftentimes people take that as like, well, okay, then it's up to me. I need to make my own judgment, make my own discernment, and go with my own feeling about what's true and what's not true. It kind of reminds me of a time when I, many years ago, was at a Ram Dass retreat in my early years of retreats before I was a monk, and somebody asked Ram Dass, well, and this was at a time when there was a whole lot of teachings going on via channeled entities. Some of you may remember that era of Seth and Ramtha and all sorts of entities speaking through other entities. And there was quite a craze around that. And somebody was asking Ram Dass, what about this phenomena of, entities? There's all sorts of teachings out there coming from these beings. Should I believe them or not believe them or what? And Ram Dass, gave some quite wise advice. He said, well, just because there's entities speaking through other beings doesn't mean you necessarily have to believe them. What if your Uncle Charlie were talking through somebody? Would you necessarily believe it just because he was talking through somebody else? So it was sort of like his advice was, use your own wisdom to decide these things rather than just going on some appearance of specialness from another realm. But what the Buddha says to the Kalamas at that point is okay, Kalamas, when you know for yourselves that certain things are wholesome or unwholesome, or skillful, unskillful, blameless or blameworthy, when you know for yourselves that they lead to harm or the suffering of others, when you know that they're actually unwholesome or blameworthy or cause harm, then you should abandon those activities. So, contrary to the kind of popular interpretation of that being, follow your gut instincts, do what you know is right inside yourself, the Buddha is saying, well, look and see the effects of what it is that you're thinking of doing. And if it falls along the lines of causing harm, being blameworthy, would be criticized. If it would be criticized by wise people, then let that be your guide. So it is, yes, when you know for yourselves, but when you know for yourselves using a set of guidelines that point towards harm or non-harm. So there is a value, a basis for your decisions, not just a gut instinct. It was underlined by another memory that I had of when we first opened the monastery. A group of us went up to Leggett to visit Choki Nyima, a Tibetan Dzogchen teacher. And we joined in with a question and answer session, and it was a similar question from one of his students that was basically, she was saying, well, I've just learned over the years that, people say a lot of things and people give a lot of teachings, but I really just have to keep going back to what seems true to me inside, going by my gut instinct. What do you think about that? And his response was, bad idea. He said, gut instincts, following gut instincts is what gets most of us into a lot of trouble over time, because we're not necessarily coming from a place of wisdom. And you have to use more than a gut instinct. You have to use discernment. You have to use wisdom to see what it is that your gut instinct is telling you and where it will lead. And you have to have some basis for judging that and for evaluating that. That's not just based on our own internal desires, which sometimes are fraught with confusion. So the Buddha goes on in this series with the Kalamas to do some questioning with them. And it's a teaching on virtue, and we talked about that earlier, that basically what he ends up talking about is a teaching on virtue. But when you really look at the structure of how he did it, it's actually, in addition to that, it's a very strong teaching on how to develop discernment, because the way he goes about teaching and sharing his instructions is kind of a questioning and encouraging them to use their own faculties of discernment to discover this for themselves, to discover and evaluate and develop the skill of questioning themselves as to what results in suffering or non-suffering, which is, of course, the point of all the teachings, is to realize the end of suffering. So he asked them, what do you think when someone acts with greed, hatred, or delusion? He does this in a more slow, methodical way, but when someone acts in a way from greed, hatred, or delusion, does that usually result in blameless or blameworthy activity? Does it have wholesome or unwholesome results? Does it lead to the welfare and happiness of others, or the suffering and difficulty of others and oneself? And they respond accordingly, appropriately with, well, when you act upon greed, hatred, and delusion, it usually results in blameworthy, unwholesome activity and suffering. And then the Buddha goes on to expound further that oftentimes when people are operating from greed, then they end up breaking precepts, taking the life of other beings, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, out of that cloud of greed. And similarly, for acting out of ill will or hatred, aversion, people will break the same precepts. And similarly, when acting out of delusion. And then he turns it around and says, well, when people act out of non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion, does it usually result in wholesome, unwholesome activities, blameless, blameworthy? Does it cause the harm for other people and oneself, or does it lead to non-harm? And they answer accordingly. Well, of course it leads to non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion, non-blame, all result in blameless, wholesome activities. And similarly goes through the precepts, saying these states of mind encourage the keeping of these precepts, which lead to the welfare and benefit of all beings. So he takes them through this process of having them logically understand this for themselves, based on these values of non-harming. And then takes the teaching a bit further and talks about the development of the Brahma Viharas, based on having established a purified heart through virtue, through sila. So it's a great teaching on benchmarks, on teaching people how, through their own discernment, and through the teachings of other wise beings, to see for themselves. Yes, to see for themselves, not based on just blind belief, but through their own experience, how one can hold these teachings on virtue, and to see the results of what comes from doing that. Other benchmarks are, Buddha talks about them in different ways, and actually the teachings that we've been studying from the Anuruddha series are all, in a way, they're a series of benchmarks. This Dhamma is for one who is modest, not for one who is self-aggrandizing. It's for one who is contented, not discontented, energetic, not lazy, interested in seclusion, not interested in engagement and company. It's for one who is mindful, not unmindful. One for who is concentrated, not unconcentrated. One who is wise, discerning, and for one who is not engaged in proliferation. So these are all benchmarks that we can look at to see where we are. We can use them for evaluation for our vimamsa. Has what I've done, has it resulted in a desire for and a result of modesty for all of these qualities that we just talked about? Where am I along these lines, and along these benchmarks? Same teaching, similar teaching to Mahapajapati Gautami about what we can help discern as to what is in line with Dhamma, in line with Vinaya. Same, actually, 4 qualities, the first 4 of the Anuruddha, of modesty and contentment and energy. Seclusion, the wish for seclusion, and then adding some more of being dispassionate, unfettered, and kind of, trying to think think of the word shedding. I think shedding is the word, leads to shedding, not accumulation. And also to being unburdensome. So these are all qualities that we can look at and say, well, has my practice resulted in this? Do I feel more inclined towards simplicity, more inclined towards being unfettered with things in my life? Am I content with the requisites that I have? Is my life less complicated? Am I less of a burden on the world? Am I treading more lightly in the world? And you can see all of these kinds of qualities are qualities of relinquishment, of qualities of letting go, whether they're external activities or whether they're internal states of mind, towards simplicity and freedom of the mind, ease of the mind. Is that the result of what I've been doing? Paramis are similar, the 10 paramis. Dana, sila, nekama, sila, morality, virtue, generosity, renunciation, and all of the others. Again, energy and truthfulness and wisdom, discernment, equanimity, loving kindness, patience, determination. All of these qualities, we can review them one by one in our practice. Has what I've done resulted in a little bit more of some of these, or a little bit more of each of these? More benchmarks to use. And I would bet, judging from the looks of things and the way people have been practicing, really applying effort this past 3 months, and the sharing that's gone on with that, I would bet that just about everybody can point to some growth along these lines, if not most of these lines, little bits and pieces. So to take that in and really make that part of the contemplation, can I notice some small changes over the past 3 months? Just little ones. And what is the actual effect? What's the effect in the heart? Where the goal is to looking for more freedom of mind, a peacefulness and an ease of being. And you can see from each of these different kinds of qualities, just that tone. What is the tone of the heart like? Is it a bit lighter? Maybe, developed a bit more patience with a difficult situation, or a bit more humility in the face of trying circumstances. Realizing that it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of self-honesty and willingness to go through unpleasant difficulties, unpleasant situations, interactions, ways of being habitually in our own minds and in our ways we are with other people, and to consciously look at that, and to practice with our own patience, our willingness to be with the unpleasant, and to see the results of that, the actual, as difficult as it is, the freedom of mind that comes from that kind of honest self-evaluation. Or reflecting times of service. There's been a huge amount of service through the winter retreat. The crew, winter retreat crew especially, has just been tireless and positive in their offerings of keeping us going here for the past 3 months so that we can step back. And to look at that you can review that for yourselves and see the joy that comes from that. It's really nice to give at that level. It really feels good. And to review that, to take that in, to reinforce that. And just in the community itself, the small and large acts of generosity that we've all done and accomplished through the past 3 months in helping to support the retreat ourselves. Yeah, and the fruits of application of our mind to the bhavana, the practice, the contemplation, many hours on the cushion, on the walking path, trying out different techniques, some successful, some not successful, and maybe seeing little glimpses of tranquility, peace of mind, letting go. And what does that feel like? Can you sense that lightness that comes when that happens, that sense of stillness, freedom, that comes through this application of effort? Occasionally have been touching into the news, watching what's happening in the world around us, and it's of course it's all through filtered news services, so it has its own edge to it that you never know exactly what's exactly happening out there. It's always through different opinion filters, but we were just chanting the precepts tonight and going through those and listening to people, this small group of people here, making these determinations not to take the life of any living creature, not to take that which isn't given, not to take advantage of other people in any way possible, not to lie, not to engage in false and harmful speech. And just contrasting those two things in my mind and just feeling, as we were chanting those precepts, just feeling an incredible sense of there is goodness. There's a lot of weird stuff happening out in the world, but there is still this pocket of people, and there's small pockets all over the place, similarly to this, but just reflecting how fortunate we are that these teachings are still alive, still present to act as a counterbalance to the trends that are going on outside of here. And we can all review that, use that as a reflection of our practice, whether it's out in the world, in the monastery, but keeping that sense of goodness alive. So using our wisdom, using our discernment to review where we're at, and then letting that act as an inspiration to go back to the beginning, to establish a continued interest in the practice, in taking on special contemplations, seeing where they go along the same lines, positively reinforcing the cycle of picking up the training and following through on it, reviewing again the effects of it, and letting that have its own result in its own time. Kind of like zooming out on the map again. It's good to delve in and dig deep, explore certain areas in a focused way, and then to draw back and see the full picture. Where has this taken me in the overall picture, the overall scheme of the practice? We do our earthworm practice, digging through little bit by little bit, chewing through the difficulties and the muck underneath, and then we kind of zoom back up to the surface and see the results of a tilled earth with earthworms. And I'm sure there's a lot of little plantlets that are coming up for people as a result of that earthworm practice. 3 for sure, 2 white and 1 brown coming up, little plantlets. But just to, take this opportunity past the next week to review, refresh, reinvigorate, and to enjoy the last bit of time to relax and open up and just be gentle and kind and simple. Take pleasure in the fact that we can make this a very simple practice, not get too gnarled up in it with unfulfilled expectations, but to really take stock of the goodness that's happened this past 3 months. So I'll offer that for reflection this evening.